Living off the grid looks like the perfect escape. No bills, no noise, no crowded cities. Just a quiet cabin in the middle of nature, surrounded by forests, mountains, and complete freedom. At least, that's what it looks like, because what most people don't see is what happens after the cameras turn off. Across the world, thousands of people are leaving modern life behind. They're walking away from cities, jobs, and the systems that once controlled every part of their daily routine. And at first, everything feels exactly how they imagine. Peaceful, simple, free. Mornings begin with sunlight instead of alarm clocks. Evenings end with silence instead of traffic. Days feel slower, calmer, more meaningful. But then something changes, slowly, quietly, almost unnoticed at first. Because living off the grid doesn't just remove the problems of modern life, it replaces them with entirely new ones. Problems that most people are never prepared for, problems that no one talks about. And for some people, those problems become overwhelming. The first signs are small: a solar system that doesn't generate enough power during cloudy days, batteries that slowly drain during long winter nights, a water system that suddenly stops working when temperatures drop below freezing. At first, these feel like minor inconveniences, temporary issues that can be fixed. But over time, they begin to stack up. Because out here, there is no backup, no technician you can call, no company responsible for fixing things. If something breaks, it's your problem. If something fails, you fix it, or you live without it. And that reality can hit much harder than people expect, especially during the first year. Winter becomes one of the biggest challenges. Temperatures drop, days get shorter, solar panels produce less energy, water systems freeze, and even simple daily tasks start requiring more effort. Something as basic as staying warm becomes a constant responsibility. Something as simple as having water becomes something you have to actively manage. And in those moments, the idea of freedom starts to feel very different. Because independence doesn't just mean freedom from the system, it also means responsibility for everything. Every system, every problem, every mistake. And mistakes happen. Crops fail. Systems break. Plans don't always work the way people expect. And when you're far away from cities, far away from help, even small problems can quickly turn into serious ones. But perhaps the most difficult challenge isn't physical. It's mental. Because living off the grid often means living in isolation. No neighbors. No social life. No quick trips to meet friends or go out. Just silence. At first, that silence feels peaceful. But over time, for some people, it becomes something else. Loneliness. And that's something no one really talks about when they show beautiful cabins in the forest. Because behind those perfect images, there are real people facing very real challenges. And not everyone is prepared for that. In fact, some people who try off-grid living eventually make a surprising decision. They go back to the cities they once wanted to leave, back to the systems they tried to escape, not because they failed, but because they realized something important. Living off the grid isn't just a lifestyle, it's a commitment, a demanding one. And while some people truly thrive in that environment, others discover that the reality is far more difficult than the dream. So why do some people succeed while others give up? What are the biggest mistakes people make when trying to live off the grid? And what are the hidden problems that no one tells you about before you leave everything behind? Because once you understand the full picture, you start to realize that off-grid living isn't just about escaping the system. It's about choosing a completely different way of life, one that can be incredibly rewarding, but also unforgiving if you're not prepared. And that's exactly what we're going to explore. Because once you move beyond the idea of off-grid living, you begin to face the reality of it. And that reality is built on systems, not the kind of systems you find in cities, hidden behind walls and managed by companies, but systems you have to build, maintain, and depend on yourself. Energy becomes something you have to think about every single day. In the city, electricity feels unlimited. You flip a switch and the lights turn on. You plug in your phone and it charges. You never really think about where that power comes from. But off the grid, every watt matters. Every appliance you use, every light you turn on, every device you charge, it all draws from a limited supply. And that supply depends on the weather, A few cloudy days in a row can change everything. Suddenly, energy becomes something you have to manage carefully. You start turning things off, using less, planning your day around how much power you have available. And for many people, this is one of the first major adjustments because it forces you to become aware of something you've ignored your entire life. Limits. Water becomes another daily responsibility. There are no pipes delivering unlimited clean water to your home. Instead, you might rely on rainwater collection systems, wells, or nearby natural sources. And each of those comes with its own challenges. Rain doesn't always fall when you need it. Wells can run low. Water needs to be filtered, stored, and protected, especially during winter. And when something goes wrong, there is no backup system waiting to take over. You solve the problem, or you go without. Hey, food is another area where expectations often don't match reality. The idea of growing your own food sounds simple. Plant seeds, wait, harvest. But in reality, it's far more unpredictable. Weather changes, soil conditions vary, animals can destroy crops overnight. And growing enough food to fully sustain yourself requires time, knowledge, and consistent effort. For many people, the first attempts don't go as planned, and that can be frustrating, especially when you realize just how much work goes into producing even a small amount of food. Then there's maintenance. In a modern home, most things are built to last for years with minimal effort. But in an off-grid setup, everything requires attention. Solar systems need to be checked. Batteries need to be maintained. Structures need to be repaired. Equipment breaks. A wood needs to be cut and stored, and none of it stops. It becomes part of your daily life. Not something you do occasionally, but something you live with. And for some people, that constant responsibility can feel overwhelming. Because there are no days off, no weekends where everything pauses. Nature doesn't wait. Systems don't maintain themselves. And if you ignore something for too long, it can quickly turn into a bigger problem. But despite all of these challenges, many people don't give up. In fact, something interesting starts to happen over time. The same responsibilities that once felt like pressure begin to feel normal, even meaningful. Because when you're responsible for your own systems, you start to understand them. You learn how to fix things, how to improve them, how to make them more efficient. Upfront, and that process builds confidence. A different kind of confidence than what you get from modern life. Not based on convenience, but based on capability. The ability to solve problems, to adapt, to survive in an environment that doesn't automatically support you. And that shift is one of the most powerful parts of off-grid living, because it changes the relationship you have with your own life. You're no longer just a user of systems. You become the person who creates and maintains them. But even then, the challenges don't disappear. They evolve. Weather remains unpredictable. Unexpected failures still happen. And there are always new problems to solve, which is why off-grid living isn't something you master once and forget. It's something you continuously learn. Every season brings new lessons. Every mistake teaches something valuable. And every success makes the next challenge a little easier to handle. But perhaps the most important change isn't practical, it's mental. Because living off the grid forces you to slow down. Not by choice, but by necessity. Tasks take longer. Planning becomes essential. And you begin to operate at a different pace than the rest of the world. At first, this can feel frustrating, especially if you're used to the speed of modern life. But over time, that slower pace begins to feel natural, even desirable, because it removes something that many people don't even realize is affecting them. Constant pressure, the pressure to respond, to keep up, to move faster, to do more. Out here, those pressures don't exist in the same way. Wine time is no longer measured by notifications or deadlines, but by daylight, weather, seasons. And that shift can completely change how people experience life. Simple things begin to matter more. Warmth, food, shelter, silence. Things that once felt basic start to feel valuable. And that's why, despite all the difficulties, many people choose to stay. Because once you adapt to this way of living, it offers something that's becoming increasingly rare. Clarity, a clear understanding of what you need, what matters and what doesn't. But that clarity comes at a cost. And it's a cost not everyone is willing to pay. Because the truth is, Off-grid living demands more from you than modern life ever will. More effort, more responsibility, more resilience. And not everyone wants that, which is why for some people, if the decision becomes clear, they leave. They return to cities, to convenience, to systems that handle everything for them. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because off-grid living isn't about proving something. It's about choosing what kind of life you want to live. For some, that means independence. For others, it means comfort. And for many, the answer lies somewhere in between. But one thing is certain. The idea of living off the grid is no longer just a distant concept. It's a real option, a path that more and more people are exploring every year. Not because it's easy, but because it offers something different, something real, and in a world that often feels increasingly artificial, that difference is exactly what some people are looking for.